Hi, my name is Roland and welcome to the VectrexRoli show. You know, YouTube is full of Pokemon related videos and stuff like Pokemon Go, so I thought I will show you something today that could be interesting both for Nintendo and Pokemon fans. So this is my Pokemon Mini special. I did already show that system on my channel. I showed you a few games, a great new Homebrew title and even a flashcard for the system. If you have not seen that, go and check that out. I have different playlists for different systems on my channel, and there is also one for the Pokemon Mini system, so I will link to that. I only make videos about certain topics where I have the feeling that I can bring some value to my viewers. Usually I try not to show you something you have already seen on a million other and bigger YouTube channels before, as it would be a waste of your time and also my time. You can find some videos about the Nintendo Pokemon Mini system on YouTube, but often you don't get all the interesting background information, sometimes video quality is crap, or you don't see much about the rare Japanese titles. So I thought it is time for another VectrexRoli special. The Pokemon Mini is one of those obscure systems not all Nintendo fans even know about, so I want to show you the systems and all the officially released games and much more here. Please don't expect detailed game reviews, this video would get too long then. We will only have a quick look at the games to see what is available, and I might show more detailed gameplay in future videos. First, you need to understand that I'm more interested in that handheld gaming system as such. I don't know much about the Pokemon characters, I don't know their names and what they can do, and I absolutely don't care about that. The few things I know about the original Pokemon franchise I know from my niece Julia. She even used her first Pokemon Game Boy cartridge when she showed the Saitek booster here on my channel. I will link to that older video in case you have not seen that. So she knows how to play those games as she grew up with it. But to be honest, it is not really necessary to know much about Pokemon when playing the Pokemon Mini system, as you will not find any real original Pokemon game for it anyway. So it was never supposed to replace a real Game Boy. This is more a product your parents should buy in addition to your Game Boy and your Pokemon games you already had. This was also the biggest problem with that system, I guess. Why wasting money for another system when you can get a new high quality game for your Game Boy instead? The Pokemon Mini is much smaller than a Game Boy, still also the Game Boy is portable, so if you came from a family that didn't have lots of money, you would never get a Pokemon Mini system. I personally find that system very interesting, as it is the smallest Nintendo system ever made with interchangeable game cartridges, and it has neat features like an infrared port, shock sensor, a real-time clock and a rumble feature, which was quite innovative back then in 2001 when this came on the market. In the US that system is pretty rare, it was more common in Japan and Europe. I can remember seeing the Pokemon Mini in the toy stores here in Austria back then. Because of the size and the tiny black and white LCD screen, this platform is more suitable for simple games or mini games. As you might know, Nintendo has a lot of experience when it comes to LCD games. Their so-called Game & Watch games got quite famous in the 1980s, and you can also see that in one of my videos. Go and check that out if you're interested in real old-school handheld gaming. The Pokemon Mini is of course much more modern than the Game & Watch games. Here you get a dot matrix LCD, similar to the Nintendo Game Boy. So first let's start with the Pokemon Mini main unit. What you see here is the European version. I showed it already in an older video. You could get the console in 3 different colors, blue, green or purple. There is no other difference than the color of the case and the box. Some of the games you could play as multiplayer games, so you could connect to other Pokemon Minis using the built-in infrared port, which makes those kind of games more interesting. The tricky part was to find someone that also had a Pokemon Mini system. The system came with the pack-in game Pokémon-Mini, which is basically a mini-game collection, and also one AAA battery was already included, which was sufficient to power your system as there was no backlight for the screen. You only get 96 by 64 pixels on your LCD, which resolution-wise still looks okay, as the screen is very small, and there is an 8-bit CPU running in that system. There are people out there that modded their system to add a backlight to the LCD. If you buy new old stock today, it might be that you will find some battery acid in your box, and let's hope then it has not damaged the main unit. Also always check that neither the system nor the game cartridges are yellowed. This happened in some cases when they were exposed to sunlight, and I'm not sure now if retrobrighting, if you know what that is, would help also here, as this is made of transparent plastic. There is no region lock on the system, so you can play all cartridges on all systems from all regions. Why is the European box huge? Well, there are tons of instructions included in several different languages, both for the system and the game cartridge. If you buy a European system, it might be important for you to know that English is one of the languages in the manual. There is a piece of paper showing 3 of the common games you can find quite easy today, even as new old stock. Zany cards, puzzle collection and pinball, but we will come to the games later. Let's have a closer look at the game system. I only show you one of the 3 colors here, as they all work the same anyway. Besides the black and white LCD screen and the power button, there is a D-pad, an A and B button, a reset key, and on the side there is the so-called C button. When you put in a game cartridge, there is some kind of lock mechanism that holds it in place, and you have to unlock it with a lever at the back if you want to remove it. Once I saw a video on YouTube where someone from a bigger channel mentioned that he does not understand why Nintendo did that. Well, the answer is simple. When you play one of the games that uses the built-in shock sensor, you have to shake the Pokemon Mini like crazy, so your game card would fly out of the system without that lock mechanism. That's also the main reason why it is a good idea to put some kind of hand strap or lanyard on your Pokemon Mini. Even there is also a tiny beeper built in. Don't expect fancy music and sound effects as you would get from a Game Boy, but at least there is also a rumble motor within the system. Besides the infrared port, there is a real-time clock built in, and you can store up to 6 game saves in the system, so those are not stored on the game cartridges. Those data even stay in memory when you change the battery. Only problem is when you own more than 6 games using game saves, you need to select the file you would like to overwrite then, so I guess this shows that Nintendo never planned to bring that many games to that system. I also got a Japanese Pokemon Mini system together with some games. I will tell you how I got it later. I got the blue version, but also in Japan you could get your system in 3 different colors. The box is smaller than the European version, as all the manuals are only in one language here, which is Japanese of course. The system also came with the Japanese version of Pokémon-Mini. Let's have a quick look at the Japanese manuals. They look more interesting and more colorful than the European counterparts. I guess that's because they only have to focus on one single language. They could put more effort into the whole graphics design so that it looks more interesting. They also show you 3 of the common games here, but now as Japanese versions, and they also included some advertising about the e-reader for the Gameboy Advance. If you don't know what it is, go and check out my video about that, find the link below. Believe me, that is also quite interesting to see. The Japanese system looks and behaves exactly like the European one. Also this here was made in China. The only difference you can see from the outside is that the sticker on the back contains also some Japanese characters. Besides systems from Japan and Europe, you can also find US versions from time to time. As I said, that system is harder to get and there is not really much difference than the text on the box. So if you are from the US and you want to get a Pokemon Mini system, it might be still easier and cheaper to get one from Europe. I bought my European systems from a seller on the German Amazon webpage a few years ago, and you still can find some new old stock today. Now let's have a closer look at the game cartridges. They are tiny and look kinda cute. Here I put the Pokemon Party mini game beside a Gameboy Advance card and a 3DS game cartridge that you get an idea about the size. I really like that the Pokemon Mini cartridges look more like classic game cartridges and not just like SD cards. I opened up one of the Pokemon Mini game cards and here you can see how the PCB and the game ROM looks like. All known commercial games were stored on 4 megabit ROMs. As far as I know, the system would support up to 8 megabit. That's a lot of data for such a system if you think about it. As screen resolution is low and there are no colors, you can store a lot of black and white graphics and animations and also levels on one single cartridge. Now let's have a look at the games. There were only 10 games released officially. As I said, don't expect detailed game reviews here, there is not enough time for that. I only want to show you what is available for the system, including the boxes and manuals, and give you some brief information about the games. All the games were targeted towards younger kids, so you get the typical super cute Nintendo look, but that will not be an issue for real Pokemon fans anyway. The first game is Pokemon Party Mini. You even see the Japanese version here, which was also available in a separate game box, which is interesting for game collectors. As I said, the Japanese manuals look so much nicer than the European ones, even I can't understand one single word in Japanese. The European manuals are usually in black and white only, the Japanese ones were printed in color. As there is no region lock, you can run the Japanese versions on your US or European Pokemon Mini, but then also the menu system is in Japanese language. Pokemon Party Mini is a mini-game collection. Like all games for the system, you play with Pokemon characters, but basically that does not really matter. I personally would have preferred if they would have replaced them with something else like Pac-Man, aliens or characters from the Doom shooter game. But hey, the system is called Pokemon Mini, so I cannot complain that there are Pokemon characters, and I'm also sure that all the Pokemon fans out there will really prefer that. Those mini-games have very basic gameplay mechanics like rock, paper, scissors, or there is a game slightly similar to Dance Dance Revolution, in case you know that. But at least they show you the special features of the system with those games like the shock sensor, the infrared port, or the built-in clock. By the way, as some people mix up the shock sensor with a motion sensor, the Pokemon Mini can only detect that you shake the whole system, but not how you hold it in your hands like a Wii controller could do. Anyway, in my opinion, that mini-game collection is not really fun for a long time, at least not in one-player mode, so you need definitely another game cartridge for your system. I only can show you a few seconds of random gameplay footage using the excellent PokeMini Emulator for Windows. Normally I show all the games on original hardware, but it is much easier to get gameplay footage that way. If you want to try the game yourself, check out that PokeMini Emulator. I will put a link in the description text below. It is working great and also runs on several different platforms. I also tested the 0.60 release on the Nintendo DS, but there it was running too slow, so the Windows version is much better. Of course, the emulator does not give you the full experience. The shock sensor needs to be simulated with a button, for example. Next up is Pokemon-mini cards. Again, you see the European and Japanese versions. Those are card games based on, yes, you guessed it, Pokemon characters. This is not one of my personal favorites, but that's just me, because I don't play card games in general. But you know, the 4 games included are well made, and if you are into card games, definitely check this out. Some of those games even support the infrared communication port and up to 5 players. This title is very common and easy to find, so go and pick it up. This here is Pokemon Puzzle Collection, so the title already tells you what to expect. If you like the puzzle game genre and you are willing to play those games on a small black and white LCD screen, this game is for you. There are 80 puzzles included and 4 different types. For example, you have to put together different shapes to make an image of a Pokemon and things like that. For what you could do with such a small and limited system, this is well made. Also, this title is easy to find. Next game is pokémon-mini, and this is one of my personal favorites for the system. You don't play using flipper bats, you are using a Pokemon character instead, so handling the ball is different than in a real pinball simulation game. Still, this game is fun, and I personally like such kind of games more than playing cards or solving puzzles. The game is also using the rumble feature, which is nice, and you get 90 screens and different game modes to play with. In my opinion, this is a must-have title for the system, and you can find it quite cheap. Before we will have a look at the next game, I would like to mention that there is a small homebrew scene out there for the system. I showed one of the newer games called Pokemon Psychic Seeds in another video, so go and check that out if you have not seen that. Besides the emulator I already mentioned, there are even flashcards available, and I showed one of them in action. Go and watch that video if you want to know more. This is all possible today because some smart people figured out how that whole system works, and as far as I understood, it did help a lot that Nintendo released this game here for their GameCube console called Pokemon Channel, and if you own a Nintendo Wii that can handle also GameCube discs, it will run also there. I would say that GameCube game is only interesting for gamers that did have this back in the days and feel some nostalgia for it. The only reason I mention that game now is that in this game you could also play a few Pokemon mini games, and how Nintendo did that? They built in a real Pokemon Mini Emulator into the GameCube game. That's really interesting that Nintendo did that, but it helped to hack and understand the whole Pokemon Mini platform and was good in the end for fans of new homebrew games. There was even an exclusive Pokemon Mini game on the Pokemon Channel GameCube disc called Snorlax Lunchtime, and hackers extracted that ROM, so you can play it also on a real Pokemon Mini hardware today using a flashcard or in your PC using an emulator. It is just another mini-game and not super exciting, still impressive that some people were smart enough to do that. Next up is Pokemon Shock Tetris. All the games I showed you before were also released in the US, but this title was only available in Japan and some European countries. This is my favorite game for the system, as even the Pokémon cannot ruin a good game of Tetris. If you like Tetris and you are also a hardcore Pokemon fan, you will like that those two worlds are combined in that one single game. Years ago that Tetris version was hard to find, sellers on eBay wanted €100 or more for a dirty cartridge in a beaten up box, but suddenly something must have happened. Many sellers showed up with tons of new old stock, so they must have found a warehouse full of European Tetris games, I guess. So prices were going down, which is good for Pokemon Mini fans. If you own the system, go and get this nice Tetris version here. Game collectors or people that can understand Japanese language will also want the Japanese version. Now let's come to the Japanese only titles for the Pokemon Mini system. So all the games I will show you next were never released in the US and Europe, but they work on all systems. They are often hard to find, they can get quite expensive, at least if you are looking for them in the wrong places, and the text in the games, manuals and on the boxes are all in Japanese language as you would expect. You remember the Pokemon Mini Puzzle Collection game I did mention before? Well, Puzzle Collection 2 is basically more of the same. You get another 80 puzzles if you cannot get enough of such games. The menu and everything is in Japanese language, and if you have troubles reading that, you can even go and download a fan translation from pokémon-mini.net. I will leave a link to that webpage in the description text below. Pokémon-mini.net was made by the same gentleman who also made the excellent Planet Virtual Boy webpage. Just in case you don't know, I also like the Nintendo Virtual Boy, another more obscure Nintendo system. And if you have enough from all the "it gives you a headache" bullshit you find all over the web, from people that didn't even come close to a Virtual Boy, you will find the link below to my Virtual Boy playlist. There you will find some interesting collector's items, rare homebrew games and also a beginner's guide video for that system. Anyway, I show you some quick gameplay footage of the translated Pokemon Mini game versions here whenever possible, even I know that some of my subscribers understand Japanese language. The next Japanese title is Pichu Brothers Mini, another collection of mini games, and it reminds of the first game I showed you, Pokemon Party Mini, but this one here is much harder to find and also more expensive. At least the mini games are a bit more interesting here in my personal opinion. Is this a must-have title? Well, you know, I wanted to get all released games for the system, and hardcore Pokemon fans will want also this title here. But if you want to get only a few games, this is not really something you would need, I guess. Unfortunately, I've not seen any fan translation for that game yet. Keep in mind that we are now at the section of Japanese-only titles that are not super easy to find. Those are the games that can get pretty expensive on eBay. Some sellers try to find people willing to pay more than €1,000, which never ever gonna happen, of course, so more realistic prices for some of the rare Japanese titles would be around €80 to €300, depending on the condition. They usually only get expensive if they are boxed complete and in mint condition. Before you buy more expensive titles, make sure that the clear card cases are not yellowed, and also make sure that the original plastic cover within the box is also included. I got a complete set of all Japanese Pokemon Mini releases directly from a Japanese seller. Everything was in super nice condition, and even the Japanese boxed Pokemon Mini system I showed you before was included, and also the boxed version of Pokemon Party Mini, and I did pay 17,350 yen for the whole package, which was around €147 plus shipping and customs. That's of course a lot of money, but it was still a heck of a deal when I look what people usually pay on eBay for that. You can also find some Pokemon Mini related collector's items like bags and this mousepad here. Normally I'm not really looking for stuff like that, only have taken that as I got it very cheap. Also got this Pokemon mini guide here that was part of some gamers magazine, but there is not really much helpful information in there. I guess the intention here was more to promote the new game system. Okay, let's continue with the last 3 games, and I hope that this video is not already too long and boring for you. The next game is called Pokemon Breeder Mini, also known as Pokemon Sodateya-san Mini. I hope I did pronounce that correctly. What this is basically a Tamagotchi-like game with Pokemon characters. I guess most of you will know what a Tamagotchi is. It is a handheld digital pet created in Japan in 1996. Here you can see some of those handheld devices from back then. So if you like that kind of game genre, chances are you will enjoy also the Pokemon version. You can get a translated ROM version for that game, which will make it much easier to understand what you're doing for most of you. This is not my kind of game, but I'm sure that there are a lot of Pokemon fans out there that will love and want this. The next game I would like to show is Pokemon Race Mini, which is a platform racing competition where you can control Pikachu, which is basically the only Pokemon character I really know. I personally like this game. In my opinion, this is pretty fun if you already had enough from minigame collections and puzzle games. Pick this up if you can find it for a reasonable price, but it can get quite hard and expensive to get that. The last game I will show you is also a title that is very hard to find. This is Togepi's Great Adventure, released in 2002 I think. In my opinion, this is one of the better or even best titles. I still like Tetris more than this, but this game is my personal number 2 I would say. You have to guide a ball-like creature, which is obviously called Togepi, and you control that thing out of a tower and you have to avoid traps. Very simple gameplay mechanics, like it is the case with all Pokemon minigames, but it has nice graphics, it works great even on the tiny LCD, and it is fun. You can also get a translated ROM version for that game. This game can be really hard to find boxed and complete. So there you have it, the Pokemon mini system and all official games for it. Is it worth getting that system and some games? This handheld system is for sure not for everyone, but if you're a Pokemon fan you might want this, and also if you like obscure Nintendo or handheld systems like I do, this could be interesting for you. If you're not really sure what to think about it, download the excellent emulator and give it a go. Even if it does not give you the full experience, you might get an idea if you would like it. I would not pay a fortune for this system, it is not really super rare or anything like that, and you still can find it for a reasonable amount of money if you search long enough. If you find it loose without boxes or manuals, it might even get dirt cheap. I hope this was interesting, entertaining and helpful for you. You know, making videos is a lot of work and very time consuming, and as this is a non-commercial hobby activity, this is a free service for you, so please consider subscribing to my channel to show your support. You will find a lot of stuff here you have not seen on a million other YouTube channels before. Please like, share and feel free to leave a comment. Say hello to us also on Facebook, and as always, thanks for watching.